This is Diesel for We the People News. Alrighty. This video is without prejudice and without recourse. Alright. I'm not waiving any of my rights, none whatsoever. Now, I may sign the service agreement due under duress to UT. Alright. But that was under duress where I wouldn't be able to do such things I'm doing right now. Alright. I never look straight forward. I always look around me to be able to protect myself by any means necessary. Again, I may say opinions, but I'm not giving legal advice. Why? Because I'm not an attorney, y'all. Alright, this is my favorite lady. Second favorite, I guess. My wife's my first. My daughter's second. She's my third, I guess. I just keep adding things, don't I? I'm going to make all these ladies mad at me. Alright, let's, I haven't watched this video, so I believe this is going to be about executive orders, from my understanding of what I've seen. Alright, and we need to know this, y'all, really. If this is what it is, we need to know what authority executive orders actually do have. Let's go.
Welcome back to the KrisAnne Hall Show. Hope you don't mind our little set change that we have here. Got you in my little Liberty First Society classroom format. Just so you are aware that we do education like this every day, all day, 24/7 at libertyfirstsociety.com. So if this is something that you are interested in, if this is something that you want your kids to know, then you need to be a student at libertyfirstsociety.com. Now, you can just go to libertyfirstsociety.com, or you can use the QR code here with your phone, screenshot it, whatever you need to do to get to it. Either way, you will get to libertyfirstsociety.com, and then you can be a member of America's #1 trusted and recommended online institute for constitutional education and training. We teach the Constitution as if the founders themselves were teaching it. No historical revision in our American history, just things as they happened, as they're meant. So, as I promised, we are going to be talking
The true intent of the Constitution, not this fake news that these oath takers has taken. Remember, they have not taken Article 6, Title 4, Section 101. So they're not truly government. And they never truly took an oath. So therefore, they're not truly representing you.
Today about Biden's executive order on abortion. What does that actually mean? How does it work? Bottom line, how does it affect you? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about executive orders in general. Just as a little review, we have 3 branches of government. This is a very important point because we have a principle in American government, whether it be federal or state and local, called separation of powers. And separation of powers dictates that the powers that are delegated to the legislative, to the executive, and to the judicial branches are not to be shared. They are to be exclusively limited to those branches. And that's the way our U.S. Constitution works for the federal government. Article 1 outlines legislative branch, its formation, its construction, and its delegated authority. Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution outlines the executive branch, the construction of the office of the president of the executive branch and its delegated powers. And then the same with the judicial branch being limited and defined by Article 3 of the Constitution. Separation of powers says that these powers that rest within the executive branch cannot be used by the legislative or the judicial. Same with the legislative branch. The power to create law is reserved to the legislative branch. It's why in our previous episodes where we talked about Roe v. Wade and Supreme Court opinions, that guess what? Roe v. Wade, a judicial action that fell under Article 3, is not the law of the land because lawmaking is reserved to the legislative branch. The judicial branch does not make law. The judicial branch does not enforce law or execute law. The judicial branch, their only authority is to offer opinions on the law. By the way, it is not their authority to interpret the Constitution. You will find that nowhere in the Constitution. Their duty, their authority is granted with the singular purpose to compare the laws of the legislative branch, the actions of the executive branch, to the Constitution as an immutable standard. Not a living, breathing document, an immutable standard. So if the actions of the executive branch contradict with the standard of the Constitution, the opinion from the judiciary reflects that. If the laws created by the legislative branch contradict or not made pursuant to the Constitution itself, then guess what? They are, the duty of the Supreme Court is to give an opinion that reflects that. So just remember, we have 3 branches of government. They are limited and defined and restrained to their specific delegations. Now, if that sounds a little strange, we're going to cover that a little bit, right? So the purpose of the Constitution is not to grant you rights. The purpose of the Constitution is to create a limited and defined government so that you may freely exercise your rights. Your rights are inherent to you by your creation. They are not constitutional. It is not the purpose of the Constitution to give you rights. It is the purpose of the Constitution to create a limited and defined government so that you may freely exercise your natural and inherent rights. Now, this is not Chris Ann Holm making this up. This is James Madison, whom we call the father.
I like to say, to make it easier on some of the other people, all right, that the Constitution is for the federal government not to trespass upon your inalienable rights unless you committed harm upon another. That's exactly what the Constitution is. It's a no trespass sign to the government not to intervene in your private. Of course, they trampled on that, but that's what it's supposed to be.
Of the Constitution. By the way, I will just very humbly say, without James Madison, we wouldn't have the Constitution that we have today. So, to disregard what I am showing you today in today's show is to completely wipe James Madison out of history. And in doing that, you eliminate 3/4 of everything that has to do with the Constitution. Hey, I just thought of something. Maybe that's why we're going to tear down the monuments and change the names and get rid of the founders. So if you wipe them out of history, then you eliminate all of the instruction, all of the reference to the proper application of the Constitution. And then the Marxists and the communists and the leftists and the revolutionary anarchists, they can just make it up as they go along because now you have no evidence of how the Constitution's actually supposed to work. Just a little bonus for your educational dollar there. James Madison writes in Federalist 45, the powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. They're not just few. They're not just defined. They're few and defined. We put them in a box. He says specifically, those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. The former, meaning the powers delegated to the federal government, will be exercised principally on external objects, foreign affairs, war, peace, negotiation, and foreign commerce, with which the power of taxation will, for the most part, be connected. Do you see the majority, just another little bonus for your educational dollar, the majority of taxation, the majority of funding the federal government was supposed to come through foreign commerce, not through your pocket. See, if it's the small...
What? What? Taxes are not supposed to come from us? Oh my goodness.
things that really matter. If we had actually followed our Constitution, we wouldn't have a 16th Amendment. We wouldn't have the federal government reaching their hands into your pockets to fund what they do. We would have the federal government's majority funding coming from foreign commerce. Now watch what Madison also says here in Federalist 45. The powers reserved to the several states will extend to all the objects which in the ordinary course of affairs concern the lives, the liberties, the properties of the people, the internal order, improvement, and prosperity of the states. So to remember that the powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. How does that play out? It plays out because we have enumeration of powers. Article 1 enumerates the power to the legislative branch. Article 2 enumerates the power to the executive branch. And Article 3 enumerates the powers to the judicial branch. Federal powers are few and enumerated. State powers are numerous and reserved. There are no gaps, guys. They're either specifically enumerated or they fall to the states. Now, that's a completely different class, so we just sort of wrap that up and move it over here because that's something that you're...
If there is a gap, then the power still resides to the people automatically, y'all. Courts keep on saying, well, there is no case law on this. Well, then that means the people automatically win.
Want to have to follow through and understand through a different class at libertyfirstsociety.com. But is to this specific enumeration of power. Because if you're going to understand executive orders, if you're going to understand how executive order works, if you're going to understand who it applies to and who it doesn't apply to, you have to understand the first foundational principle that the power delegated to the executive branch is specifically listed in Article 2. And if it's not specifically listed in Article 2, it does not exist. I want to repeat that. If a power is not specifically listed in Article 2, it does not exist. And
I'm going to repeat it. Which leads it to the freedom of the people.
Here's Edmund Randolph, one of the delegates to the Constitution, a writer of the Constitution, the 7th governor of Virginia. He writes, but in the general Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, its powers are enumerated. Is it not then fairly deducible that it has no power but what is expressly given? For if its powers were to be general, an enumeration would be needless. Why would we go through the trouble of making a list? If we just said, the president can do whatever is necessary and proper to carry out his job. Whatever it is the people want him to do when they elect him. He says, if that was the case, why did we even enumerate powers? Why did we even make a list? Well, we didn't make a list so that you could ignore it. We made a list so the President of the United States, the executive branch, would be limited and defined. Article 2 is where...
I'll go a step further. If there wasn't that list, then why don't we actually have kings? We gave in our president the kingship. Our presidents, because of ignorance of the people, made our president and judges kings over us, and we became subordinate servants to them. Alright, this is part 1. These will be the People News.